A woman's scream that pierced through a Pattaya apartment building would haunt the cleaning lady forever. Inside the unlocked room, a 25-year-old woman's heart lay beside her mutilated body. Her remains were scattered across the bathroom floor like discarded toys. Security cameras had captured a man fleeing at dawn, desperately trying to board a flight to China. But the most disturbing revelation was yet to come, a confession that would transform this from a brutal murder into something far more sinister. The killer claimed he wanted to try performing an autopsy, like Pete seen on TV. And investigators suspected he had done something even worse with the victim's missing lung. This is the case of Waranun Note Panacha and the Chinese tourist who turned his vacation into her nightmare. The convenience store cashier had seen thousands of customers over the years, most blended into the background of his routine: scan, bag, smile, repeat. But something about the man who walked in that April evening made him look twice. The customer spent 12 minutes wandering the aisles, stopping at odd corners, staring at products like he was making mental calculations. When he finally approached the counter, his purchases seemed innocent enough. Scissors, tape, black plastic bags, clear plastic bags, plastic zip ties, moving supplies, the cashier figured. People buy weird combinations all the time. The man paid quietly, smiled when asked his name, Fu Tongyuan, during a friendly small talk, and disappeared into the Pattaya night. 2 days later, that same cashier was flipping through TV channels during a slow shift when breaking news stopped him cold. Mysterious woman's body found in hotel room. Victim's body severely mutilated, heart ripped from body. The mugshot that flashed across the screen made his blood freeze. The same polite customer who'd bought all that plastic and tape. The same man who'd smiled and given his name without hesitation. What the cashier didn't know was that he had just witnessed the final preparation for one of Thailand's most horrific murders, a crime that would expose the dark underbelly of paradise and spark a national conversation about violence against transgender people. 3,000 miles away in China's Hubei province, Fu Tongyuan, a welder, had been living what most would call a death-in-life existence. Wake up, weld, sleep, repeat. No vacations, no excitement, just the mechanical rhythm of a man going through the motions. At 42, Fu was a man who got bored with everything: jobs, video games, relationships. He preferred casual hookups to commitment, claiming he'd never really thought about what would make him happy. When a friend mentioned tour groups to Thailand, something sparked his interest. Maybe this was his chance to finally feel alive. That first group trip to Thailand changed everything. Fu fell hard for the country. The beaches of Pattaya, the street food, the night markets, the intoxicating sense of freedom. When he returned to China, the gray routine felt unbearable. So he saved up and went back alone. The second trip was a revelation. No schedule, no group to follow, just pure freedom. He would go anywhere, eat anything, be anyone. It was exactly what he'd been craving his entire life. By his third solo trip in April 2025, Fu thought he had found his personal paradise. He had no idea he was about to turn it into someone else's hell. While Fu was discovering Thailand, a young transgender woman named Waranun Panacha was building her own life of independence. Everyone called her Note, a 25-year-old with glowing skin, long straight black hair, and a beautiful smile. Note wasn't just beautiful, she was ambitious and had already overcome significant challenges in her life. She had undergone gender reassignment surgery and was living authentically as the woman she always knew herself to be. 4 years earlier, she had asked her family in Nong Khai province for permission to work in Taiwan while studying Chinese. It was a bold move that paid off. She became fluent in the language and spent 2 years building skills and saving money. When she moved to Pattaya after 2 years in Taiwan, her parents would visit her regularly, proud of their daughter who had become their family's breadwinner. Note was living proof that transgender women could thrive, could dream, could build meaningful lives. She sent money home regularly, supporting her family while carving out her own space in Thailand's most tourist-heavy beach town. And she had no way of knowing that her path was about to intersect with that of a bored Chinese welder looking for thrills. It was a perfect day at Pattaya Beach when their worlds collided. Fu was doing his usual routine, enjoying the seafood, playing in the water, soaking up the freedom he couldn't find back home. And that is when he spotted her. Note was sitting alone in the shade, wearing a cute swimsuit, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Fu hesitated. Maybe she was out of his league. Maybe she was taken. But when their eyes met and she smiled, he knew he had to take the chance. They exchanged names and WeChat contacts. The conversation was easy, flirtatious. For Fu, it felt like the perfect vacation romance. For Note, it seemed like just another tourist encounter in a town full of them. Neither realized they were setting the stage for a tragedy that would shock even seasoned investigators. Their text messages over the following days grew increasingly warm and suggestive. Riding high on vacation confidence and his newfound sense of freedom, Fu asked Note to meet at his rented apartment in Soi Arunotai for the night. But this wasn't going to be a simple hookup. On April 25th, 2025, around 9 p.m., Note agreed to meet. But she asked for 8,000 baht, which is about $240. Fu agreed without hesitation and paid the full amount upfront. And what happened next would depend on decisions made by two people who barely knew each other in a rented room far from home, with expectations that didn't align and personalities that would prove volatile in the worst possible way. Before their midnight meeting, Fu made that fateful trip to the convenience store. But instead of buying what you'd expect for a romantic encounter, he purchased scissors, tape, and plastic bags. When police later asked why, he claimed they were for self-defense, a bizarre explanation from someone who constantly talked about how safe he felt in Thailand. And Fu had rented the apartment room that very same day, April 25th, suggesting this may not have been as spontaneous as it initially appeared. The clock was ticking toward midnight, and paradise was about to become a crime scene. Now, this is based entirely on Fu's account of what happened that night. Note was waiting in the lobby when Fu arrived, looking especially beautiful that evening. They held hands walking to his room, and from the outside it looked like any tourist romance playing out in Pattaya's countless hotels and apartments. Once inside, Fu couldn't contain himself. He kissed Note, making the first move, expecting the night he'd paid for. But Note pulled away. She avoided his advances, distanced herself from the man who had just handed over $240. And the rejection hit Fu like a slap. Here he was, finally feeling alive and free, and this woman was backing away from their agreement. He demanded his money back, all of it, or at least half if she'd already spent it. But Note refused. The money was hers now, she argued. She had a right to keep it. What started as disappointment escalated into argument, then into something darker. The physical fight that followed wasn't just punches, it was hair-pulling, scratching, desperate grappling. During the struggle, Note kicked Fu in the face hard enough to break one of his front teeth. And that is when something snapped inside the man who had spent 42 years feeling bored with everything. Fu jumped back onto the bed, pinned Note down, and used his left knee to press on her neck until she stopped breathing. Looking at her lifeless body, Fu experienced something he'd never felt before, a rush of adrenaline so intense it was almost addictive. For the man who got bored with everything, this was the ultimate stimulation. And then the thought crossed his mind, what if I play with her a little bit more? What Fu did next defies comprehension. He dragged Note's body to the bathroom and retrieved the scissors he'd bought hours earlier. What followed was a systematic mutilation that would leave even experienced investigators vomiting at the crime scene. Fu later told police he was curious about what was inside the human body, whether it was quote-unquote just like what you see in the movies and TV dramas. But it was more than curiosity. He specifically told investigators he wanted to try performing an autopsy after watching numerous television series featuring medical procedures. He cut open Note's chest and abdomen, removed her heart and silicone implants, scattered her organs around the bathroom. When he was done playing, as he called it, Fu felt tired. So he left Note's mutilated remains in the bathroom and went to sleep, like it was any other night. Hours later, he woke up and methodically cleaned the scene, washing away blood and evidence. Then he booked a flight to China, packed his belongings, and took one last look at the dismembered body. He smiled, remembering the thrill he'd finally found after years of boredom. Fu called a motorcycle taxi, took a bus to Bangkok's airport, and tried to disappear back into his old life. He thought he'd committed the perfect crime, but he was wrong. Around 2 a.m. that night, a cleaning lady was working in the hallway when she heard sounds that would haunt her forever. Loud arguing between a man and a woman. Then a desperate female voice, "Let me go, please, don't hurt me." The banging that followed, something or someone hitting the door repeatedly, went on for what felt like an hour before everything went silent. Apartment staff later said they had heard the loud arguments that night, but dismissed them as just a lover's quarrel, a tragic assumption that meant no one intervened to help Note. She suspected something terrible had happened, but what could she do? She had no proof, no authority, so she finished her shift wrestling with whether to report what she'd heard. In the morning, she told the building manager, and that decision would blow open one of Thailand's most shocking murder cases. The cleaning lady knocked on Fu's door, but got no answer. The door was unlocked, so she went inside, calling out to whoever might be there. The main room looked normal, no signs of struggle, no blood visible. But when she looked toward the bathroom, she saw something that would scar her for life. Human body parts scattered across the floor, internal organs everywhere, what looked like a human heart lying near the mutilated remains. Her scream echoed through the hallway, alerting everyone that something horrific had been discovered. Police arrived around 10 a.m. on April 26 to find a crime scene so gruesome that veteran investigators were physically sick. Note's heart lay beside her body. Her organs were scattered throughout the bathroom, but one crucial piece was missing. Half of her lung was nowhere to be found. And forensic investigators later found suspicious abdominal incisions that raised the horrifying question of whether some of the mutilation occurred while Note was still alive. When police searched the room, they found a bag containing clothing, scissors, and other tools, evidence of the premeditation that had gone into this horrific crime. Initially, this led investigators to suspect organ trafficking, but as they reviewed security footage, a different picture emerged. Around 6 a.m., cameras had captured a man leaving the building hastily, carrying a suitcase and wearing a panicked expression. The man was Fu Tongyuan, and he was already on his way to the airport. Police tracked Fu's movements with precision. He'd booked China Eastern Airlines flight MU742 to Kunming, thinking he could just simply return to his old life as if nothing had happened. At 1:45 p.m., less than 24 hours after Note's body was discovered, immigration officers arrested Fu at Suvarnabhumi Airport. His face was covered in scratch marks from his struggle with Note, visible proof of their violent encounter. At first, Fu played innocent, claiming he knew nothing about any murder. But when investigators presented him with evidence, chat logs between him and Note, her phone found in his possession, CCTV footage showing his panicked departure, his composure cracked. Under interrogation with an interpreter present, Fu's story tumbled out. He admitted to strangling Note after she refused him and broke his tooth. But then came the chilling part, his description of the adrenaline rush he felt seeing her lifeless body. "I was just curious about what actually resides inside her body," he told police. "I wondered if it was just like what you see in the movies." He claimed TV dramas had inspired his actions, that he wanted to play with her body like it was a toy. When asked about the missing lung, Fu's responses were contradictory. Most reports quote him denying taking it, insisting he'd only toyed with her heart. However, one source alleged he confessed to eating the missing lung, a claim that, if true, would elevate this from murder and mutilation to cannibalism. And this confession immediately ruled out the organ trafficking theory, leaving investigators to grapple with something perhaps even more disturbing: a murder committed purely for the thrill of it. The revelation of Fu's crime sent shockwaves through Thailand. Here was a man who had claimed to love Thai culture, who felt safe and free in the country, who had turned that freedom into license to commit unspeakable violence. Note's family was devastated. During a police reenactment, her father struck Fu with a plastic bottle before collapsing from grief. Her mother screamed curses at the man who had destroyed their lives. "I still cannot accept the loss of my child," her father, Awan, told reporters later, his voice breaking as he talked about the daughter everyone called Note. But the family's pain was compounded by something almost as cruel as the murder itself: vicious social media comments attacking their dead daughter, including posts suggesting the death was deserved. Fu was charged with intentional murder and theft, denied bail, and transported to court under heavy security, complete with helmet and bulletproof vest, due to fears of vigilante justice from Note's family and angry locals. But the case was about more than one man's violence. Note's murder exposed the vulnerability of transgender people in Thailand, particularly those working in the sex industry. Advocacy groups pointed out that criminalization of sex work leaves people like Note with little protection and no recourse when things go wrong. The case also sparked anger about Thailand's visa waiver policy for Chinese tourists. Instead of boosting tourism, critics argued, the policy had created a situation where violent criminals could enter the country with minimal screening and accountability. Swing Thailand, a prominent LGBTQIA+ rights organization, stepped in to support Note's family in their quest for justice. Her father even called for the death penalty, rare in a country that has moved away from capital punishment. Victim compensation of about $5,700 was made available through Thailand's crime victim assistance programs. But, as Note's family said, they would give up every penny if it could bring their daughter back. Note's family brought Buddhist monks to perform a soul-calling ritual at the crime scene, hoping to bring peace to their daughter's spirit. Her body was taken to the Police General Hospital's Forensic Medicine Institute for comprehensive analysis before being returned to Nong Khai Province for funeral rites. Meanwhile, the transgender community in Pattaya organized solidarity demonstrations along the beach where Note and Fu had first met. They were responding not just to the murder, but to inflammatory social media posts, including one in Lao that read, "The end of ladyboys who pretend to be women is to have their hearts and lungs cut out." As of now, there have been no major updates on Fu's trial. The case appears to be working through Thailand's court system, with no indication that the psychological evaluation many experts recommended was ever ordered. Fu himself claimed he'd never had mental health treatment and didn't know if he suffered from any psychological conditions. For investigators, this raised troubling questions about how someone could go from watching medical dramas to performing unauthorized autopsies on murder victims, potentially including acts of cannibalism. And the conflicting reports about whether Fu ate Note's lung highlight how some details of this case remain unclear. But what is certain is that this was far more than a simple murder. It was a deliberate act of extreme violence that shocked the country. For Thailand's transgender community, her story makes clear that visibility without protection isn't safety. So even when society acknowledges their existence, if there is no protection from those who would exploit or harm them, there is no truly safe space to call home. Note was more than the tragic circumstances of her death. She was a daughter who supported her family, a woman who had the courage to live authentically, and someone who had dreams and ambitions that were cut short far too soon. And for her family, friends, and the community that knew her, the pain of this loss would endure long after the legal proceedings conclude. Our thoughts remain with all those whose lives she touched, and with everyone working to ensure that such senseless violence becomes a thing of the past. That is all for today. Thanks for watching.